Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Maisres, Perik Aleph, Halacha Beis. We're learning today Daf Dalid, and we left off on Daf Dalid, Amid Aleph, 5 lines from the top of the Amid, by the end of the line, by the 2 dots, Kol Ho'adumim Mishayadimu. So the Mishnah, Halacha Beis, gives us simonim to know when a specific fruit reaches their state of oichel, which means that prior to a food reaching into a minimum amount of development or ripeness, halachically, objectively, it's considered unedible or inedible. Therefore, if one, for whatever reason, if a person harvested that product prior to that stage, it will never be obligated to be tithed, even if this individual person will choose to eat it, even if this person will choose to merchandise it. And the Mishnah, the Gemara today is going to go over many specifics that we had in the Mishnah. We're going to begin when the Mishnah gave you the general rule after enumerating certain fruits that kol ha'adumim, that all fruits that turn red, it means that when they begin to develop, they are green, and they go from green to red, misheya adimu. When do they reach status of oichel? When they start to turn red. I just want to speak words of Kabbalah, that green is bina and red is gevura. In other words, we're going down milmaila lamata, which is the way things really are, because everything begins milmaila. Everything comes from Hashem. So it goes from Chabad into the Midos, into Chagas. It goes from Bina into Gevura. And when that begins to happen, then it's considered a developed fruit. We also will have by the pomegranates, the Mishnah says that they become oichel from when they become soft. And ultimately, there's going to be a very deep discussion in the Gemara as to what's the root cause for fruits to ripen. And ultimately, amazingly, a lot of it has to do with its owner, not with the fruit, not with the land, but with the owner of the fruit, as we'll speak out a bit more when we learn the Gemara inside. Now, one of the consequences of the discussion that we will have today will affect the laws of chibur. What do I mean by chibur? Chibur means when one is connected to the other. Laws of connectedness. Laws of chibur in our context would mean that if one seed of the pomegranate, as an example, reaches the stage of oichel, we say all of the seeds in that pomegranate also, b'derech mamela, are in the stage of oichel. Now, applying that, mi'inyan le'inyan, completely different, and I know we had this topic also, Masechtas Trumos, is that the Chazal made various enactments, that if you find a puncture in a fruit, even though there's a small possibility, but since and when it might have come from a venomous creature, we are afraid that not only did the venomous creature puncture it to take from it, but also afterwards it deposited some venom in it. And same question, if you find a puncture in one part of the fruit, is the prohibition only for that part or for all of the fruit? So we're going to make a correlation that whatever will be considered chibur to establish oinas hamaisres / oichel, same will be also to say that the chashash nikur will go from one part of the fruit to another part of a fruit, and none of that will be allowed to be eaten. We're going to have in the Gemara 2 ways of understanding the words harimoinim mishayima asu. I know that we keep on saying from when it gets soft, but we'll see in the Gemara 2 interpretations. The Gemara will give 2 interpretations in the shiur that the Mishnah gives by the dates. The Mishnah says concerning dates, when is it considered oichel? Mishayotilu sa'oir, which means from when they swell into sourdough. Again, 2 pshatim. And ultimately, God willing, today the Gemara will explain the machlekes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda concerning walnuts and almonds. And we're going to also reread the Mishnah Legirsa of the Gemara today, that both are speaking about walnuts and almonds. And the Tanakama says it's from when the klipa, the outer shell, becomes like a storage room. As we explained, when it begins, the nut is stuck to the klipa, and when it begins to develop, when it hits the stage of oichel, it separates itself. Separating itself will allow you to shake a walnut and to hear a little bit of the brain, to hear the meat inside moving around. Same thing is with an almond. We're going to put them both together. Rabbi Yehuda says, Mishe asu klipa, Also, there's going to be a lot of pnimius. You'll see there's a lot of pnimius HaTorah that's begging to be spoken out. And Bekitzer, as it says in the Mishnah, hafachva v'hafachva d'choylova, a lot of what we're learning right now is fascinating, even on the most pshat level, understanding better how fruits develop. So Chevra Daf Dalid, Amid Aleph, 5 lines from the top of the Amid. So says the Mishnah that Kol Ha'adumim, all fruits that go from green to red, the siman to know that they reach the stage of oichel is misheya adimum, from when they become red. Now, really, the Gemara that's bringing up Raisa is really going to move on to the next part of the Mishnah. So whether there's a mistake in the Girsa, or maybe there's something deeper here, but the next step in the Mishnah is that Harimoinim Misheyimo Asu. We're going to go now with the interpretation that Yimo Asu means from when they become soft. And on that, we have a Braisa. And the Braisa was taught by Miyasha, and Amayra, who he was the one that had in his memory the following Braisa. Miyasha Tanei, Rimain Shenikra Boy, Afilu Preida Achas. How would you know that the pomegranate is soft? Don't think you pick it up in your hand and you squeeze it. That's not the way you know. Maybe that's also how you know it. But the Braisa is telling us a fact that a bird will only peck to eat the seed of the pomegranate if it reached this stage of it being soft, if it reached the stage of Mishayimo Asu. It means if I observe a bird pecking on a pomegranate, it's considered doichel. And what Miyasha is adding is that even if the bird only pecked one seed, so you can argue, well, it's only going to eat seeds that are soft, however you define soft. Maybe it was only that seed. We don't say that. We say chibur. We say that it's a siman. If one seed is soft, then kula chibur lemaiser. We will treat the entire pomegranate to be considered yimoasu, to be considered, let's go with a pshat, soft. And therefore, yes, if someone harvested that pomegranate, he'll be chayiv, she'll be chayiv to be ma'aserit. Similarly, the same type of sign, eshkoil shabishal boyafilu garger yechidi, when it comes to grapes, here again, that when one grape became ripe, even only one grape, we say, kula chibur l'maiser. What do we say? We say that cluster, the entire cluster, is considered to have reached the oinas hamaisres, even if in reality you touch the other grapes on the cluster and they are not yet ripe. Doesn't matter. One is ripe, halachically, all of them are considered ripe. That is the end of the Braisa. So Amar Rabbi Chanina, says Rabbi Chanina, and he's going to further elaborate on this Braisa. Pashtay Hulan. Let me tell you something that not only Pashto means explained, that when Miyasha told us the Braisa, he didn't interpret the Braisa the way we just said. He did not interpret the Braisa the way the Gemara understood initially the Braisa, that if you have one grape, the cluster is considered ripe. Much more than that, said Miyasha. Not only that cluster, Kol Oisa Hagefen, that entire vine is considered already, that it has reached the stage of Oinas HaMaisros. The entire vine means on every vine you have many clusters. And then he goes further. Kol Oisa Hamin, even nearby vines, amazing, are also considered to have reached the stage of Oinas HaMaisros. Amazing. And Kevin is asking, why do we go by the majority? I don't know why. But for the same reason why we began today, that if the bird pecks one seed, maybe that one seed is only ripe, not the other ones. We don't view it that way. Halachically, we say that since they are all considered connected, they are all ripe. But then Miyasha went on further. Chazar upashtalan, Miyasha further explained the Braisa. Not only all kol oisa hamin. Kol oisa hamin means it doesn't have to be on that vine. It can even be nearby vines, but it has to be the same type of grape. No, kol oisa ruach. Kol oisa ruach means that we know that the position of a fruit vis-a-vis the sun will have a tremendous effect regarding its ripening. So what we will say is that why did it ripen? It's not about that type of grape. It's about the way it was positioned to the sun. So therefore, all of the vines that are facing in that area, that are facing the sun, which means they are on that same direction side, all of the vines to the east, all of them to the west. However, the one that you found mature is, however, the one that you found ripe is. Kol oisa haruach means that even if you have different types of grapes, they also automatically, they are halachically, they reached oinas hamaisris. And Rabbi Yossi ben Rav Buna Amar, I'll tell you even more. This is the greatest chiddush. Kol oisa hakerem, kol oisa hakerem. If you have one ripe grape, we say that everything in that vineyard is considered already to have reached the stage of maturity. Now, what will be the logic? I hold the thought. I have a certain pneumistic logic, which will be clear from the Gemara's question. That when Rabbi Yossi ben Abun says, Koloisa hakerem, what happens now, asks the Gemara, if the keren used to be cotton, and now it became gadol, which means, according to the Noise Kalim here, that let's say I owned one vineyard, and then at some point I bought the adjacent vineyards. That means that they were initially two, but now they belong to the same owner. Or the opposite, that there used to be one large vineyard. I owned a large shetach of land, and I sold off certain parcels. Or a bigger chiddush, not that it has different owners, but they were physically separated or physically united, that I had one vineyard and I made them into two, which means I put a fence in the middle. Or if I had two vineyards and this year I decided to make them into one, regarding all these scenarios, we don't know what would Rabbi Yossi ben Abun's opinion be. Let's read inside the Rashi Ilio, the right column, 3 lines before the bottom. Hoya kerem cotton v'asa gadol, shehoysev olav kefanim, kedem efarish lekame, shehoyu shnei keramim v'not al geder shebentayim v'asa nechad. So here he's saying that the kerem cotton v'asa gadol, that Rashi Ilio is saying, and the echad v'asa shnayim, he's learning pshat. It's the same. The Gemara is explaining itself. Kedem efarish lekame, that you made it into one or you divided it into two. Mi amrin andolo yamru ela bigefanim shoyo imdim boise kerem sheniked boyeshkala gefen. Remember that's what we learned yesterday. Like, how do you know? Just remember that simon. How do you know that a grape reached the stage of maturity? Let's go with the simon the Gemara gave. When its skin becomes so translucent or transparent that you can see all the way down to the seed. So when that happened to one grape, do end up Yossi ben Avun saying, aha, if that one reached that stage of maturity, so did all. So what's all? Aval atois v'shohaisif, b'shana acheres, b'kerem, I'm going Rashi Ilyo now on the top of the left column, loy mitztarfi, oy dilma, havi chat kerem, or inami, the other direction, that the cholkoi hakerem, gewaldik. All of that is a boya doloi ifshutalan, and he just quotes, that Rashi Ilyo quotes, that the Rambam Zal paskins like Rabbi Chanina, which says that what? Koloisa haruach, and not like Rabbi Yossi ben Abun that says Koloisa hakerem. So I just want to say the following, that looking at the physical position of a grape vis-a-vis the sun is a physical reason why it will develop quicker. It got more sunlight or less sunlight. We also, by the way, it's not just about sunlight. Throughout Bavli, we had a few times the sugya is connected to ruchais, meaning pashat, the winds, the ruach tzfaini, the ruach deraimi, and how they also affect the sun effects, the moon effects, the winds affect, and we in Chazal understand that the wind coming from different directions have a complete different effect, including on how things mature. So Rab Chanina would be like a physical thing. Since on this side, the other vines were facing the sun the same way, they were getting the same ruach, so halachically it's considered developed. When you speak about one vineyard, all the other sides has nothing to do with the sun, because it can be on two different opposite sides of the vineyard. It can be on two different opposite sides of the vine. You know, we have and Parshas Chayesara, right, where the Torah, after the Torah records Avraham Avinu's purchasing of the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, it says Vayokim Sedei Ephraim. Vayokom Sedei Ephraim. The Sada lifted itself up, stood up. So Rashi writes, I forgot the exact, right? Tkuma Hoisaloi. It became elevated. In other words, that the owner and the items that one owns have a very deep relationship. When we say that tzaddikim are medagdek on their belongings, even for the smallest amount of money, that those who hate us say, aha, you see that, you guys are so money hungry, you won't give up even a penny. Yaakov Avinu basically... Pachim Ketanim, he risked it himself, but it's not that way. It's that everything that is under my possession has a unique shaykhus to me. Yes, that means my avoida of dira betachtoinim is on how much of this tachtoinim. Well, by hashgacha pratis, whatever it is that I own, certainly those are the items that I have to use ba'avodas Hashem. And if I forego it, it's not about the money part of it. Point is that there is a deep spiritual relationship between a person and that which he or she owns. And therefore, perhaps that the development, the ripeness of my vineyard has to do with my ripeness. We're connected. So if the owner reached a certain stage in his or her development, that will on some level manifest on the physical kerem, and that would make, that perhaps will be the logic of Rabbi Yossi, but Abun, koloisa hakerem. And even there, okay, it doesn't have to be in the same. If it's divided with a fence, if this was mine earlier, means I have a longer connection with it. That type of logic will give us a deeper understanding in the two sides of the inquiry that remains unresolved. And as the Rashi earlier points out, regardless, we paskin like the Rambam and these dinim. Don't forget that there's no Shulchan Aruch on all of these laws, right? So these are laws that Hilchas HaMashiach. And we paskin that no, that we don't say Koloisa hakerem, we leave it down to the physical world. It has to do with Koloisa haruach. Gavaldik. Okay, let's go weiter.
But by the way, it's interesting to look at each one of these different fruits, that it seems like the concept is similar, but it's different based on the number of them, right? Like a pomegranate, one seed gives you that fruit, but doesn't give you the rest of the fruits on the tree, I don't think.
Very good point. Very good point.
Whereas, let's say with the figs, we said one fig. Yesterday we learned with
the whole tree,
right?
Very good. The whole tree.
The whole tree.
Very good. Very good.
And then with the grapes, it seems like a whole different. Well, there's a machlokes, obviously, right? Is it the whole vineyard? Is it half the vineyard?
Point well taken. Point well taken. I want to just say one thing about the figs. Going back, that like I mentioned, one of the reasons why figs are excluded from the dinam of peah is because that was the example the Gemara gave in Masechtas Peah. Because likitasa in ka'achas, one of the 5 criteria for peah, doesn't happen by a fig. That means when people own fig trees, they dafka don't harvest the entire tree at the same time. So you would think, Danny, right, that if they're not fully ready at the same time, why would they reach oinas hamaisres at the same time? But that's not the case. That's the biggest chiddush that we learned yesterday, that one fig, when you take it off the tree, and within 24 hours becomes ripe. Okay, so that fig is considered ripe. So now the entire tree. Another, just to finalize one thing with what we're learning today, not all of it has to be so physical. Am I understanding? I mean, that was the whole word, like the bird pecked one seed of the pomegranate. I don't think that the Baraisa that we started today out with is telling you that all of the seeds in the pomegranates are yima'asu. Let's go with soft. I don't think it's saying that. It's saying that halachically it reached the stage. Even though begashmius, it's not fully developed. Why? Because it's considered connected. And let's go back to the chibur. So just like we have the concept of chibur, let's go with chibur. Chibur means that since it's connected, koloisa haruach, koloisa hakerem. So even though physically one is not fully developed, but since part of it is the kevan, I don't know why we don't go by the majority. We go by if some of it developed, all of it is developed. How great is that? Another reason for Mashiach to come. You don't need the roiv. If you have one tzaddik, the whole world becomes worthy. Everyone is considered developed. So therefore, that when Chazal said that if there is a nikud, if there is a puncture on certain products, where b'makim that there's a very small, but a possibility that they were punctured by a nachash, by a rachash, or by another venomous creature, so Chazal said you can't eat it. What's the it that cannot be eaten? Chibur, how much can you not eat? So Shmuel Amar, that dela'a shenikra bebeis ibeha. The beis ibeha means when a gourd is found punctured while it's still attached to the ground. Listen to what he's saying. Kol oisa haguma asura. Typically, gourds are planted in a hole. And therefore, just like chibur, same concept of chibur. If one gourd, let's say they planted 10 gourds in one hole. Kevin, good luck on finding a picture for that. So the point is that the chashash of venom contamination is not limited to the one gourd that is taka punctured. We say, no, if this one is punctured, all of the gourds that are in that same hole will be also prohibited. Says the Gemara further, like Shmuel said concerning a dalas in holes, af b'machbedois tomorrow, when it comes to the brooms of palm trees, right, have branches. We're familiar with them, that it was commonly used in the times of Chazal for brooms. So that's just the lotion of machbedois tomorrow. So all of the dates that are growing on a broom, all of those dates, if even one of them was found to be punctured, all of the dates on that broom is also going to be forbidden, similar to the din of Shmuel. Now, Amar Rabbi Yosi, and we're quoting a Braisa, that Shaul Yoinason ben Charsa, Ish Gnisar, Es Rabban Gamliel v'Chachamim biyavno. What did he ask? He asked them, Nikurei retev bi'iveim, not fully ripe dates. Just to know, the word retev means liquid. Before dates become fully ripe, they're very juicy. So when you go today to Glattmart and you buy the juicy dates, everything there is B, nothing is A there. The prices are for A products. So now, so that's the word. When people buy, it's juicy, right? Right, Kavan, right? The Persians, juicy. Remember, juicy dates are not ripe. It's a bad simon. One day, Kavan is going to take us on the come against the Russians. It's okay. I'm open. I deserve it. So we're good. We're friends. No, it's good. It's good. Just to wake each other up over here. Bottom line is, just to know, retev means juicy. And when juicy is connected to dates, it means they're not ripe. So let's go. So nikure rekev bi'ibeyem, when they're still connected to the tree, so they're not fully ripe. Mahain, what's their status? Again, what do we say? Amruloi kol oisa hadekel asur. Actually, you have from Rabbi Yosi that this tradition that Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim were even more chamur. Right before we learned only on that branch, on that maybe not on that branch, on whatever shtickle would be used for a broom, those become asur, but not more. He's saying no, Danny, very good. The whole branch. Look inside the last Pnei Moshe, mamash the last line. And why are we talking about this? So I did the ka'amar le'el me'ingen chibur la'maisres, like we spoke out. Nakat nami laha le'ingen chibur mishum nikur hanachash. Okay, all right. Pever daf dalid amid beis. Now, Amar Rabbi Yosi. Let me just clarify the novelty of what was said. Now, you would think the novelty is, see, when you read it, is that even though only one date is punctured, but because of this concept of chibur, lenikur, everything is asur. Rabbi Yosi, the Amoyde Rabbi Yosi is saying, no, you got it wrong. If only one date is punctured, vada, of course, everything is asur. Look at his logic. Once you discovered that there was a snake in that region, in that neighborhood, in that tree, maybe others were punctured. But you might have thought, listen to his logic, that if every single date has a puncture. Now, guys, snakes, venomous creatures don't do that. When you find a tree that all of the fruits are punctured, now we're learning new things. That's a proof that birds did it. So, Adarabah, if you find everything punctured, you would think, there we can be more lenient. So, Rabbi Yosi is saying a chiddush. The chumrah of the Braisa is that you're right. All of the fruits punctured in that tree, they were attacked by birds. But maybe, look at the chashash, a bird pecked a date where prior to the bird there was a bite of a snake, and you don't know where that might have happened. We had similar dinim also when we learned to sugya and trumos, that one hole covers the other. Just because you see a hole happening, it doesn't mean that prior to that, in the same place. That's how far, because of Chamiras Akanta Miyisura, how machmer we are. Amar Rabbi Yosi Lochein Tzricha. Let me tell you the Chiddush. That even b'shenikru kulam, even if all of the dates on the tree are punctured, like I explained, and that l'choid is araya, these punctures came from birds. So therefore, I can eat all of them. So that's a proof. Look at the expression. A cloud of birds, a pack of birds. Shochan aleihem v'nikru, and birds are not venomous. Nevertheless, Kamash Malan, you're right. All of the holes came from birds. But maybe in the B'Makaim HaNekev, Nikvu, that they punctured it where a snake punctured. That's the Chiddush of the rights. Rabbi Yoina B'Shem Rabbi Shimon Chasida, Nikurei Retev B'ibeim, not fully ripe dates when they're still attached, right? B'ibeah. The truth is that the Chachamim and Rabbi Gamliel's psak is correct, which means it should be usher. However, bottom line is, people de facto don't follow it. We're not condoning, but we are saying that once the majority of the people, remember this rule, we learned this in Truma, Mesechtas Truma, that when it comes to danger, there is a lot of weight given to how do people behave. Since de facto people allowed themselves to eat those fruits, and they suffer no harm. So therefore now that it became a reality that the public are lenient, I get to say, that's the pasuk, Shomer Psoim Hashem. I can behave like a fool. I can behave like someone who's ignorant. What do I know? I know that birds pecked it. Why should I go ahead and say that, prior to that, there was, in one of these dates, or in a few of them, and maybe I'm taking punk that one, they were perforated by a snake. Even if it was perforated by a snake, who says the snake deposited venom, I get to fall into that unconscious state. And indeed, even though I'm behaving like a fool, God will still protect me. Again, this has to do with the fact, how do you define danger? One of the halachic definitions of danger is something that the public considers dangerous.
Majority. You go with the majority.
Here you go by the majority. Very good, Kevin. Skydiving is not dangerous because the Rabbim, Nahagu Behem Heter. Even driving is not considered dangerous, even though it's a lot more dangerous than skydiving, because Rabbim Nahagu Behem Heter. Okay, then so again, we're speaking about the Rimayim. In the Mishnah, we interpreted Yimo Asu means when it gets soft. Really, here we go. Two taichin. Rabbi Zaid, Rabbi Shem, Rabbi Yasa, like we said, Mishi Yismar Choichel Tachas Yodov. When they become soft, now another detail. How do you define soft? Soft means that when your hand squeezes a seed, the juices come out. In other words, they dissolve. Yimas, right? Yimas means to melt. They melt. Aber Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Yuda Bar Pazi b'Shem Rabbi Shua ben Levi, he teaches the words Yimo Asu Mishayachnisu Mechza, which means when they are filled with half of the amount of juice than the fully ripened pomegranates. And I want to go back to what we quoted yesterday, the machlokes between Tosfos and the Rosh on one side, that said that all of the Simanim in the Mishnah are really a shlish, versus the Ritva, according to the B'Shem Rabbi Yehuda ben Levi, this is a proof to the Ritva. In other words, if it's all about a third, here he's saying Mechza. Mechza is not a third. It's a different siman by the pomegranate. Now, regarding the second understanding of Yimo Asu, Rabbi Yoina Boy, Dilma min Rabbanan da Agada Tohu Shamalei, that maybe, in other words, he's just trying to understand, where did Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi know, where did he see that the words Yimo Asu, which the pshat of this word means to melt, where do you know that it means half? And maybe, so he said himself, maybe when it says in Parshas Devarim, Achenu hey masu as livavenu, this is speaking about how the spies filled our hearts with fear. Now, I want you to know that the pshat interpretation that our brothers, hey masu, our hearts, it means they melted our hearts. They melted our hearts in fear. So just to know, that's actually our source to the Rab Ze'era b'Shem Rabbi Yasa, that Yemasu means soft, to melt. But there is a agadata. The Drush of heimasu means that they split our hearts. They very different, guys. Just to know this, melting a heart is said either when you're filled with love. My heart, you look at your anicle, not your kids, anicle. Oh, your heart melts. It depends whose kids. And then you have the fear. The fear. My heart is melting in fear. Splitting, we know what splitting is. Splitting is much worse than fear minded. Splitting means they were struggling. They had emunah, but because of the report, they began, we could do it, no, we can't do it. We could do it, we can't do it. The split between the Nefesh Elikis and the Nefesh Bahamas. Split is half and half. We're not saying half and half, but coming back over here, it's a Gaval. So maybe from that source that you know the words Yima'asu means melting, Ba'agadata, Palgan Levavenu, I would say Palgan Levavenu, in the case of the spies, is a lot nicer. It's nicer. It's harder. It's why nicer? Because what are we saying? That they became filled with fear? We're saying, no. Part of them were filled with fear. They were focused on the fear, but even when they had the fear, the other half of their hearts, the godly half, had emunah. That's, by the way, that's what the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, that all Moshe Rabbeinu did to them, right, was to tell them that you guys are not making it in there. You know what? You're going to stay in the desert. And all of a sudden they said, "Ooh, now we believe." How did they believe? They believed the whole time. Half of them were believers. Half of the same person is a believer. We are all trusting and we are all untrusting. That goes to all of us. And that's the Hemasu Palgon Levavenu. Okay, next. The Mishnah spoke about the Tamarim. That the dates, how do you know that they're, when do they reach Eichel? Mishe yotilu so'oid, when they swell like sourdough. So the Gemara clarifies, Rabbi Barva Amar, that Mishe yismalei hacheretz, in the beginning, there are crevices in the body of the date, and only when they fill with juice, on the way to becoming mature, like we said, on the way, when they're fully mature, they're not so juicy. But on the way to becoming mature, because of their moisture, all of those crevices becomes filled in. Okay, Rabbi Yoina boy, man nan kaimen. What are we talking about? What are you talking about? Im b'sheyismalei hacheretz. If it is like Rabbi Barva explained, if the way you understand it, that when the crevices fill in, then it's oichel. That's not true. Why is that not true? Because that happens in a stage that we know from other areas in Chazal. We call that date en noiveles, just to know the words noivel milavanon. We have these words in Hasidus. Noivel means that if there's a certain power in the wind, some dates will flow off, will be blown off the tree. And they're blown off the tree prior to the stage of Oines HaMaisres. When the cracks of the dates are filled in because of its moisture, that date is already prone to be blown off the tree if there's an unusual wind. And we know that such a date will be called enoiveles. And we know that enoiveles, we know this from other Mishnayos, that a date that was blown off the tree doesn't have to be tithed. So you can't be right, you Rabbi Barva. On the other hand, if the words Mishiyismalei Hacheretz would mean, very similar to what we had later in the Mishnah by the walnut and by the almond, that the date pit begins completely stuck to the meat, completely. And as the date ripens, there is a loosening. There is an inner separation between the pit and the edible part. If that's the meaning, that can't be either. That can't be, because once it reaches that phase, that's not the beginning of Oines HaMaisres. That's a sign that the date is fully ripe. Pshelehi kol sarcha. So I disagree with you. Rabbi Barva Simin is too early. Filling in the crevices doesn't bring it yet to Eichel. If it means the other option, that also can be our Mishnah. So what is it? Here we have today's second explanation on the dates. So Rabbanon of Kisaron Amri, it means Mishayishketem v'yu yafais la'achilom. In other words, from when the dates can be spread out in the sun. And as we already mentioned yesterday, very interestingly, this is a rule by all fruits, that when you detach the fruit from the tree, that in itself, for many fruits, that allows the fruit to ripen quicker, compounded with sun is very beneficial. So when the dates reach a phase that if you were to detach it and have them spread out in the sunlight, they would become mamish geschmack to eat. That's the siman that it reached this minimum stage, and it's considered oichel. Weiter. The next case in the Mishnah was haparsiken peaches. Mishir tilu gidim, from when they develop sinews. What are we talking about? What are the sinews? Rab Ze'eda b'shem Rab Isi says, Mishir yatilu gidin adumim. Peaches, as they ripen, begin to develop red sinew-like strings, and they go from the pit to the pulp. Just to know how they go. They're going from Malchus back up, from the in to the out. Very good. So now we find Kevin is waking up. So I don't see any sinew-like strings. First of all, the fruits today are genetically modified. First, to kill us. Second of all, it's not the same. It's not what the Oivish. So all of these pictures, lav dafka, are God's.
Maybe that's what it means. Those little stringy things coming out of the pit. Maybe that's what it means by the sinews.
Maybe my eyesight is not good, or maybe your zoom is better. I didn't see any strings, but if there's strings there, then you're good. Kaven has no expression, so I don't know if he's on this side or on that side. Say that, doesn't matter. We're doing the best we could. Next. Now, I want to say like this. Guys, when we read the Mishnah yesterday, you can go look on the Mishnah. I know that I was wondering. Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says egoizim and shkedim. In our Mishnah, the word shkedim is not written in the Tanakama. In other words, our Mishnah reads, I don't see any sinews here in the picture. Anyways.
Looks like sinews to me.
Okay, maybe I don't know what sinews. I thought sinews are like veins. If sinews are like strings.
So that's those little strings. There's a lot of them.
I don't see any strings. I see reddening. Okay, weiter. We could see this. So anyways, let's moving on. Walnuts. So the Tanakama in our Mishnah says that goizim mishiyasu migura, that we explained. When the outer hard klipa becomes completely separated from it, so it becomes like a makavarachik, a storeroom, not stuck on it. Actually, the girsa, and I will look back, he brings it in the girsois on the side. The girsa that our Gemara has is that even the Tanakama was also speaking about almonds. So in other words, the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda are arguing by both. The Tanakama says that how egoism, you see inside the girsa, v'hashkedim, when do they reach the state of oichel mishiyasu megura? When the nut becomes separated from the klipa, from the hard shell. And on both, Rabbi Yehuda argues, and he says that egoism hashkedim, when they reach oichel mishiyasu klipa, when they form a klipa. Now, what are we talking about? The Gemara has to clarify. So we are quoting a braisa that's going to further elaborate what's the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanakama shita is very self-understood. And again, you can know yourself. I can know it. Take a walnut and shake it. If you hear the nut banging back and forth, so it's mature, it's ripe. If you don't hear that noise, it's because it's stuck. It didn't even reach the oichel stage. So Amru explaining Rabbi Yehuda, what klipa are we talking about? There is the outer hard klipa, and then there is the inner membrane-like klipa. For whoever learned the laws of Terefa, we have many similar things, or chulin by animals, the two klipas, the outer and the inner. Let's speak up this words of Hasidus or Kabbalah. The outer klipa, the outer is the worst. The shalosh klipas is hard. Think about a walnut. It's hard. You can't eat that shell. It has to be discarded. The inner klipa is the inner thin membrane that's mamish on the nut. And by the way, it can be washed off easily, and it also can be consumed, which is really how we understand the concept of klipas noiga, that you can elevate it. That's what he's talking about. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda holds that only from when the inner klipa gets developed, then the nut is considered oichel. Moedim chachamim Rabbi Yehuda. The chachamim agree to Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to other nuts, which are iltsarin, hazelnuts. When it comes to pistachios, look how pistachios are written. Pistokin, uva'a pistokin. And when it comes to pine cones, be'itztere roivilin. When it comes to these three nuts, everyone is in consent that it has to reach a more development. Just want to make clear, guys, the inner klipa develops after it's disconnected. Obviously, think about it. If the nut is stuck to the outer, if the nut is stuck to the outer shell in the inside, there's no room for the klipa to develop. It's stuck. The nut has to disconnect inside. Now there's more space. Now the klipa develops. So it's a later stage. Rabbi Yehuda is being makel. Until when it reaches the later stage, it's not considered oichel. Everyone agrees by hazelnuts, pistachios, and pine cones that when is it considered oichel? Only mishiyasu klipa, and not by the first stage when the nut just becomes disconnected and the outer shell is called now like a room, a storage room. Next, the Mishnah spoke about carobs, hacharuvim, that when is a carob considered oichel, misheyankiru, from when it becomes spotted. You know, it's as they ripen, the skin develops black spots. As they ripen, the blacks, that's like us, human beings. When we're young, we're tzaddikim. And as we ripen, some darkness begins to set in. Okay, so Tani Rab Chinana bar Papa, that actually by charuvim shilshulan hu chanatan. We're going in a complete different topic, me'inyan le'inyan, regarding carobs, and that is the following: that when it comes to the dinam of maisris, even though we didn't speak it out yet in this mesechta, but just quickly reviewing, we have to first identify what year does this product belong to. Why? Because aside of the fact that the third and sixth year, the second tithe is Meiser Ani, not Meiser Sheni. So it's not only to know, are you chayiv to give Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani, even if it's between the first and the second year, or the fourth and the fifth year. There is a rule that you are not to be toidim nor ma'aser mishana l'shana, from one year and the other year. So you have to know this fruit, this vegetable, this grain, what year did it grow on? And for that, you have to have its critical point and a date. And the dates are not consistent, without going through all of the dinner because it's late. But by fruits, people remember. The first Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah, Machlokes Beishamai and Beis Hillel, we paskin like Beis Hillel, that Tu B'Shvat is the Rosh Hashanah for Peiros Le'ilonis. In other words, now that's the date, but what needs to happen? Sometimes it goes after the Shirasha. Sometimes it goes after Shlish. By Peiros Le'ilon, it's Chanata. Chanata is when the fruit begins to emerge. Now, even though, in other words, if the Chanata happened before Tu B'Shvat, it belongs to the prior year. If the Chanata of a fruit happened on Tu B'Shvat forward, it belongs to the next year. Just to know what year are we talking about. Vadai, again, Meiser Sheni, Meiser Ani. However, we learned the following, that Charuvim is an exception. We don't say by the carob that it's Chanata. If it happened on Tu B'Shvat on, it belongs to the next year. No. That Shilshulan Uchanotim. It's interesting that when carobs begin to develop, this is not Chanata. Way after Chanata, at some point they begin to grow and they begin to hang down like chains, like a change, like an ishtalshalus. Only when it reaches that stage, that is the stage that we say, if it happened Tu B'Shvat, it's from the next year. If it happened before Tu B'Shvat, it belongs to the prior year. Guys, I want to finish to the end of the Amid. We have a couple of more lines. Then the Mishnah added, not only do we say that this black spotting is connected to carobs, but the Chol HaShchodim. Shchodim doesn't have to mean black. It means all dark fruits. What will be an example? Going Imvei Hadas. We know that myrtle has berries. We know this from Masechtas Sukkah. Remember, all these dinim, berries. If it has the roiv berries, you're not good. About removing it on Yom Tov. The kitzur, those berries begin green and they turn not red, they turn into dark. So that's the dark spots. Or another example is ve'invei sneh, berries of a thorn bush, which is what we call in English blackberries. They also begin one color. And from when are they considered oichel? From when they become spotted. It means they don't have to turn fully black, but when they have spots of black. Mishayankidu. So says the Gemara, that Tani Rab Chinana bar Papa, Mishayasu nekudes chayres. This is the point, that they have to develop various black spots. Again, and not turn black fully. That's fully mature, but even when it has how many numerous, I have no idea. Then the Mishnah spoke about Perishin. And when we learned those fruits that they begin with a fuzz. We'll call that a fuzz, a beard, and then the beard falls off. That's a siman that they're getting mature. Balding is a sign of maturity for all you baldies. So when we learn Perishim, we didn't say what's the fruit Perishin. So the Gemara says, what's Perishin? Is pargilin, which means quinces. The Lama Nikra Shema Perishin. Why are they called a parush? She'ein lochamin ilan. Shu parish like a data elalizeh. Parush means separated, designated, exclusive. And interestingly, all other fruits, say chazal, they could be eaten raw and cooked. You have an option. The one exception, and I want to hear a challenge over here from the big chefs, the only exception by fruits, say chazal, is the quince. So that's why it's called a parish, because it's not to be eaten off the tree. It's not like the other fruits. It can only be eaten while they're cooked. And we'll stop over here.